name's John Jordan. I'm with Go Local Interactive. I'm one of the co-founders at Go Local. We're a digital advertising agency. We service larger companies in the industry. Our goal is to attract companies who have grown substantially over the years, and as they've grown, it's become increasingly difficult for them to localize their digital presence for the number of locations they have. So we really specialize in helping to come in and fill the gaps from a service perspective and align their strategy at a local level with each of those individual facilities and locations. Since Section 508 was published in January 2017, there's been a lot of additional lawsuits that have come out. This is primarily due to the broadened scope of the requirements that came out. Industries like the banking industry, the financial sector, they were some of the first that were to see some of these lawsuits. But over time, more and more industries have become susceptible to it. And it's just now kind of working its way into the self-storage industry where some lawsuits are being filed. What we've observed is that from 2016 to 2017, there's been about a 16% increase in lawsuits in that time period. We don't anticipate that that's going to slow down, unfortunately. It looks like 2018 has started off where there's an increased amount of lawsuit activity happening. What we really feel like is important to understand is that this is a pretty far-reaching thing. It's not just the storage industry. This affects a lot of industries. Google came out with its first accessibility standards in 2016. Webmaster guidelines. They included accessibility in their webmaster guidelines. And when Google talks, we tend to listen, especially within the agency world, but should be the case also on the client side, the advertiser side. Storage operators should understand that Google doesn't often come forward and tell us, hey, this is an important factor in the way we evaluate you as a business, and it's important to how we perceive the user experience you provide to consumers, and therefore we're going to evaluate and rank you based on how well you address these ADA standards within your website. One example of how they're continuing to expand and grow that and make it known to us that they see it as important is recently they made a change to Google Maps where they added wheelchair accessible criteria for Google Maps so that consumers can differentiate between facilities that have wheelchair accessibility and those that don't. That's another clear signal from Google that's important. We also, as an industry, I think, need to understand that this isn't going away. This is these compliance standards are under both federal and state. There's legislation pending in both federal and state level, and so it's really important that we get out ahead of this as an industry, and that we try to prevent a lot of these lawsuits in the future by addressing these issues before they come to us. First and foremost, let's start with kind of defining what is the compliance standard that's been set. It's referred to as WCAG 2.0 standards. WCAG stands for Website Content Accessibility Guidelines. And coincidentally, 2.0 is the one that's used right now. 2.1 is actually going to be coming out later here in 2018. But those guidelines, they can be broken down into an acronym. The acronym is POUR, P-O-U-R, and those are the kind of the guiding principles of accessibility. P stands for perceivable, O stands for operable, U stands for understandable, and R stands for robust. So let's talk a little bit about each of those. From a P perspective, perceivable, it's important to make sure that your website is perceivable to all users who would visit the site. And to give you an example of that, the use of video captions is an example. If you have a video on your site and it doesn't have captions, what that essentially means is that a visually impaired user, someone who's blind, comes to your site and is using a screen reader, they won't be able to interpret what that video is really about because there's nothing there that they can actually see. And the same for the hearing impaired. So from a hearing perspective, if you're deaf and you come to a site and it has a video, you won't be able to hear the content. So the captions will actually allow you as a user and the screen readers to pick up all of that information about what the video is about and communicate it to users who come to the site. From an operable perspective, it's important to understand that every user has to be able to use the site in the same ways. So a good example of operable from an accessibility perspective would be a form of some type. So let's say in the storage industry you have reservation forms. If a user is using a screen reader, and again they're visually impaired and they can't see the website, being able to tab through each of the fields that they're inputting is really important. Otherwise they may get stuck in that first field and not know where to navigate to next to complete that reservation. It stands for understandable. Again, the site needs to be understandable to all users, and you may think that because there's text on the page that it's understandable to all users what content is on that page. However, let's use that same example of the form that needs to be filled out. If there's a field and it doesn't have a description of the field that's readable by screen readers, then that person could land in the field and not know what information you're actually requesting that they put into that field. So having those descriptions in place on the fields in a form, as that example, makes it understandable to that user what you're asking them to do to complete the action. The last one is robust. So you want the user's experience to be robust no matter what browser they're using, what device they're using. You really want our user agent, like the screen readers we were talking about. It's just really important that no matter how the customer is accessing your site, that they're able to use it in the same method of every other user. The other point that I would make from that is that accessibility is often characterized when it comes to websites as the visually impaired, but it actually goes really beyond that. It's much more robust in terms of the guidelines. You not only have the visually impaired that you need to be addressing with your through the guidelines, but you also have the hearing impaired, the motor impaired, and even cognitive disabilities that come into play. So it's important to understand those. The first thing to know is that you need to meet either A or AA standards. That's the standard that's been established through the court systems as the standard that needs to be met. So it's important to understand what that entails. That would mean that you're going to have to go through a series of audits, ADA compliance audits, to really determine where you're falling down or failing as a website, to kind of give you that hit list of requirements that you need to still meet. The other thing to understand there is that this is, it's an ongoing dedication to meeting ADA standards. Not only are there changes within the ADA standards continuously, but your website is going to change continuously. You're going to add photos, you're going to add new functionality, new pages to your website, and as you do so, it's really, really important to understand that ADA compliance has to be taken into account with each of those changes. So as you add a photo, you need to ensure there's alt text on that photo so it's understandable to screen readers. As you add a new piece of functionality or new pages, there needs to be additional steps taken from an ADA standard to address those. In addition to that, there are certain points I can kind of highlight for you. There's ADA compliance involves a lot, but I'll highlight a few things just to keep it top of mind. The first thing is captions. Captions are really important for any audio or video that's contained on your website. There are automatic captioning options through video like YouTube, but it's important to understand that those are not perfect technologies and that you're going to need to be able to review and really make sure that the automatic captioning is accurately depicting and capturing the essence of what your video is about, so that that person using the screen reader can actually understand the video content, or the person who is hearing impaired can understand that video content the same way everyone else that visits your site can. It's really important with the use of images that we understand how alt text is leveraged to help those visually impaired, hearing impaired, really understand the content that we have on our website. Additionally, I would say the use of clear title tags on each page of your website is important. Those title tags are essentially your way of describing to the screen reader, in this case, the purpose of the page's content, so that someone who, again, can't see the page can interpret what that page is about and understand it. Additionally, you'd need to be concerned about the use of H1 tags, H2 tags, H3 tags. These are referred to as header tags, and essentially they help to organize, to help the screen reader understand the organization of the information and content on a page. And those are really important as well. I would say one of the final things that the short list would be to look at links on the website. Often the links can provide a lack of clarity to the user in terms of what lies on the other end of that link. In other words, the link may say click here or read more, where it really needs a more descriptive element that would allow the user who's using a screen reader to understand what lies on the other end of that click for them. From an ADA compliance perspective, there are a lot of benefits to that go beyond just what we've described. You have user experience, so you want that experience to be the same for every user that actually navigates to your website and utilizes it. And that's the number one is user experience. The second one would be SEO and organic rankings. As I mentioned earlier, anytime Google comes out and actually tells you something is important from a SEO ranking perspective or an algorithm perspective, you have to listen. And in this instance, they've been pretty prominently telling us for a while now that ADA compliance is important, and they've come right out and provided standards for how they're going to evaluate us. So it's very important that we actually listen and know that that's going to affect our ability to rank on the search engines like Google and attract more customers to our website. The third piece would be public relations. It's a great vehicle for communicating to the community that it's important to you that everybody uses the site and has the ability to use your site and take advantage of your services in the same manner. So having ADA compliance is just another way of affirming from a public relations perspective that you're working in the best interest of the community and trying to give everybody that same opportunity to leverage your services. I would also say it's important to understand that 1 in 5 Americans are affected by some form of disability. Now, that's a pretty alarming stat. That ranges from everything from color blindness to cognitive disabilities to the ones we more commonly think of, like being blind or hearing impaired. But it's important to understand there's a wide range of disabilities, and the ADA compliance standards that have been set are intended to address all of those different ones. Little things like the use of color on your site can really affect people who are colorblind and others from actually being able to see or read or utilize different functionality on your site like every other user would. The last thing I would say is that ADA compliance makes a website better. It makes it better for everyone. For you, because it's going to increase the likelihood that Google is going to perceive your site as digestible and easily read and utilized by all users, but it's also going to help users. It's going to help the people who actually are out there looking for your services that have disabilities. It's going to help them to navigate through your site and use all the functionality you've invested in. It's going to make all of the investments you've made in paid media and advertising, building your websites, ultimately more successful, because you're going to be able to meet the needs of everyone who visits.